Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brazos River Saints podcast. Today I have a wonderful guest on, Sister Stacy Fuller. Hello, Sister Fuller.
Hello.
She said to call her Stacy, and I've already messed that up. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the idea is just to get to know each other. So tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, maybe a little bit of life history. Just who are you?
Sure. So I grew up in East Texas in a small town. We lived in Longview on the east side of Longview, but I went to school in a town called Hallsville, which is, if you get on I-20 and you drive east for about three hours and 15 minutes, that's where I grew up. So almost on the Louisiana-Texas border. So I grew up there. I'm an only child and went to the same school. It'll come up. Adam and I went to the same school and we were in the same kindergarten class together. We actually stood beside each other in the kindergarten class picture.
Wow.
So he and I went to school together, K through 12. And then after school, I went to undergraduate school at a small liberal arts school called Centenary College of Louisiana in Shreveport. And I went there and got a bachelor's degree in museum management. I love art, and I'm an art historian.
Okay. And
so after being in Shreveport, I worked at an art museum while I was in college for 3 years. I was the registrar at a Meadows Museum, which is on the campus of Centenary.
Okay.
And little trivia, there's the same Meadows family has a museum on the campus of SMU in Dallas. So the family had a really large art collection, and they split it, and they put one at SMU and one at Centenary.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I was registrar there for 3 years, and then knew I wanted to work in art and in museums. So then in 2002, when I graduated, moved to Fort Worth, and I have a master's from TCU and have been in Fort Worth since 2002. Adam and I lived in Fort Worth proper for about 4 years before we moved to where we are now. And I worked in art museums for about 17 years, if you count the 3 in college. And then I worked for 14 years at the Amon Carter Museum of American Art as their director of education in the library.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't that one job for the whole 14 years, but that was the bulk of most of my years there. And I loved being able to connect people of all different backgrounds and interest levels and ages to art. We had kids a little later. I wasn't really sure that was an experience that I was excited about. And so we waited, because of me, we waited for 10 years into our marriage before we had kids. And then it turns out like having kids has been the joy of my life. The unexpected joy of my life. And we had a miscarriage before Eli, and it was like, I just knew, like when I had Eli, it was like the minute I had Eli, I traveled, I got to see so many amazing things for my job. I traveled a lot.
Right.
I've been to museums all over the world. And then I was like, I just want to stay at home with this baby. And I'm sure Adam was like, what? This was not what we signed up for.
Everything just changed.
Yeah, this was not who you've been telling me you were for the past, long time. But when our daughter was born, when she was 1, is when I left the museum. So I've been home since Ava was 1. So, and now I've been able to stay at home with them. And then I had 2 more miscarriages between Ava and Sam. And I say that because when I had my first one, I didn't know a single person who'd had one, and it was really, really terrible and really, really hard. And it took me a long time to open up about it because a lady at work who worked for me was pregnant, and I didn't want her to feel bad about being pregnant. So no one had known I was pregnant, so I didn't want to share that because I didn't ever want her to feel bad about enjoying her experience.
Right.
But then later on, as I opened up, women would say well, me too.
Right.
And me too. And me too. And I just thought, And that's their journey and their story. But I thought, oh, wow, if I'd have known that, I'd have had someone to talk to. Like, I assumed I was the only person.
Right.
I didn't know anybody. I seriously did not know a single person except my grandmother, who was already passed away when I had mine. And so I do share that now because it was super hard and still hard some days. But I share that in case so people know that there's other people they can talk to and other people who've done that.
Absolutely. I know. So sorry.
No,
you've been so good. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, please.
But I don't know what that's like because my wife never experienced it, and I've never been on the support side. But I'm surprised at how often that happens. I had no idea. I had no clue. And then my niece has had a couple of miscarriages. Actually, 2 different nieces have had a few miscarriages. My grandma had miscarriages, and there's so many people, so many women out there that have had it, and I don't. It's very difficult to support people if you don't know, and it's very difficult to just reach out, just a hand that says, "Look, I know you're going through a hard time, and I don't know what it's like, but I care, and I'm willing to listen to you." And so, thank you. That's all. I just thank you for sharing.
And this isn't really. I mean, this is a segue, but maybe it's like why I'm supposed to be on the podcast. But I learned 2 things going through my miscarriages. The first one was I truly learned it's okay to say thank you. So anytime anyone would say, "Oh, I'm really sorry," and my mom has since passed away too, and it's the same thing. Like most people's gut reaction is to say, "It's okay." Right. Like whenever someone says, "Oh, I'm really sorry," like you want to say, "Well, it's okay," because you're trying to like tell them you're fine and don't feel sorry for me. And I learned through that process, it's okay for me not to respond back with that because I wasn't okay for a very, very long time. And so I learned to say thank you in response to that.
Yeah.
So when someone would say, "I'm really sorry to hear about that," I learned to say thank you. Like, thank you for sharing my grief with me instead of like pushing my grief away. The other thing I learned when I had a miscarriage is some people who were trying to be well-meaning, like doctors, or not to who anyone who's a doctor, but a doctor I had.
Right. Some people say things that it's well-meaning, but it doesn't come across that way.
Right. And they're trying to, like, I remember my doctor going in, very first one, which happened on the 23rd of December, which was also really hard. But going through that experience with the doctor, and the doctor, in her attempt to comfort me, like telling me about a child who was born with like incredible physical disabilities, and that I should be grateful that there was something wrong with my child, and I learned through that experience that grief is not a contest.
Right.
So my grief is no bigger or smaller or better or worse than someone who had a miscarriage farther along than me, or someone who had a child who was born with extreme physical, my grief is not a comparison to that person's grief.
Right. Absolutely.
And that we shouldn't compare. We don't have to one up each other on grief. We don't. Right? And we also don't have to feel bad if we're really sad about something that doesn't seem as big as somebody else's.
Absolutely.
And so those are those 2 things I learned through that process.
One thing, so grief is grief, and even though the experiences are different, you still have the same like grieving period. And so, man, I feel so this is supposed to be about you.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, but so my senior year in college, my wife was diagnosed with leukemia. And the things you learn people, like I said, people said a lot of things that were very well meaning, but were like really not nice because they're trying to solve they're trying to give you some sort of comfort and solve your problem at the same time. No, don't. Just say, you know what? I'm sorry this is happening to you. I care. I'm interested. I love you, and I will be there to support you. That's all people need.
Yep.
And
I'm sorry are the best words, because then if people want to talk, they can, or they can say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome to talk anytime. I will listen.
Well,
but
but that it's been so that's why I bring those up is
Right.
just, and I also think there's there's a stigma around mental health. I think there's a stigma around miscarriages that,
Right.
I mean, they're a part of life, unfortunately. And so I share that I have 3 living children and I've had 3 miscarriages, and just because it's part of my story, and
Right. Absolutely.
and I just want people to know.
So if there's anyone out there that needs someone to talk to,
yes,
Sister
please.
Fuller's the one.
And I have lots of words, so I definitely can talk and listen.
Awesome.
So, but yeah, so I've been at home we have 3 kids. So Eli is in the 5th grade now. Ava is in the 3rd grade. And Sam went to kindergarten this year.
Awesome.
So 3 kids. And then last year, I volunteer a lot at the school.
Okay.
It's like a full-time job how much I volunteer at the school. But also last year I was asked to teach art for a homeschool co-op that I knew someone who was the director of. And so a couple of days, afternoons a week, I go teach art to a group of homeschool kids. So it's fun because I still have a little piece of myself in the art world, and working with kids, which I did a lot with museum education, but I also get to go on all the fun adventures with my kids too.
Oh, that is awesome.
So
it's awesome. We actually have, and I only know this because I learned this like a couple of weeks ago when my sister was here, but apparently Dallas has got a very large art district.
And Fort Worth also, yes. So
like the DFW area is just massive. And so we went to a few art museums, but like there are so many. Like I had no idea.
That's actually why TCU was my first choice when I was applying to graduate schools, because I knew coming from East Texas, I didn't want to go to New York just because it's so much larger than what I was used to. But if you look at Dallas, Fort Worth, the amazing collections of art they have here, the number of museums, the diversity of types of art that because I wanted to go somewhere I could get a job, right? I thought I want to go to school in the place where I can intern at these museums, and then I'm more than just a resume. They can attach a face to me. And if you look at, Fort Worth has the Modern, the Kimball, and the Carter all right there together, but there's also the Sid Richardson downtown.
I went to that one.
Yes.
Very interesting. Anyway.
You think about that? No. I could talk art. We could make this a podcast about art too. Wow. So there's such amazing things there. And then of course, Dallas has the DMA, but one of my favorite museums actually in Dallas, more than the DMA, is right across the street. It's very similar, where in the cultural district, you've got museums within the same walking distance. But in Dallas, the Nasher Sculpture Center is directly across the street from the DMA, and it is a treasure of a museum. But they're just right next door. So it's really cool. And all of the museums are either always free or have free days in both Dallas and Fort Worth. And so you don't think about that's Fort Worth's motto, though. They're cowboys and culture. And so it's really neat that we have the collections we have, but we're not in as urban of an area as you might think about collections being in.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, it's very interesting. That's awesome. That's your passion. That's great. So normally I would ask how you met your husband, but you told us you were in kindergarten together.
Yes.
So at what point were you like, yeah, this guy, he's
not
he's
in school. We didn't actually. We kind of ran in like social circle adjacent.
Right.
If I would kind of say like we had friends in common.
Right.
But he and I did not run in the same exact same social circle. So we've kind of been adjacent most of our life. Next to each other in the kindergarten class picture, we were actually picked our senior year as class favorites together. So we have pictures in like formal wear together, but we were not each other's date to that function.
Interesting.
So, but I was in my senior year of college at Centenary. And he was living in Utah at the time because we thought that would be more convenient. So not when we were living in the same town.
Right.
But when we were separated from Louisiana to Utah, no, we were home my senior year for Christmas, and had a mutual friend that I was going to hang out with her that night, and she wanted to go with this larger group of people. And I remember at first being really frustrated by that, because I had wanted to, like, my plan was to spend time with just her. And they were going back to Shreveport, which is where I lived. And I didn't want to go back to the town I normally lived in. But I did. And he was part of that group. And a year after that, we got engaged.
Oh,
so,
wow.
So we did the long distance thing for a little bit. And then when I graduated, he moved back down. And then we will have been married in May, 22 years.
Wow.
So.
Awesome. That is fantastic. I don't know, what year is it? Is it 20? Oh, yeah. So we're also at 22 years.
Oh, very cool. When's your anniversary? Trick question.
February 15th. So it's coming up really quick.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and it was because it was President's Day weekend, and we took the time off of school and just went and eloped. And I had no idea that it was, like, I didn't think that it was Valentine's Day. I didn't care. And then the next year I'm like, wait, what do you mean we can't get a hotel?
Yeah.
It's Valentine's
Day. And all of the flowers are very expensive on your.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool though.
But yeah, 22 years is awesome.
Yeah, you beat us by a couple of months, because we're at the end of May.
Oh, well, that's close enough.
Yeah.
22 years. That's fine.
We're both doing awesome.
That's fantastic. And I still like my wife most of the time. No, I'm just kidding. I really love my wife. So Adam was going to school in Utah, and you were in Louisiana. So let me get this straight. So have you always been a member of the church?
I'm a convert.
A convert. And Adam
has been a member his entire life. Yes.
Okay. All right. See, I knew that there was something there. So what was it that said to you that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is something that you should be a part of?
So I grew up going to church, and I think that was really helpful. One, like, I just had a tradition of going to church. I think that's hard for a lot of people who come into the gospel. Like, there's a lot of things sometimes I'd rather do. I mean, if I'm being honest, there's a lot of things I'd rather do sometimes on Sundays. And I also, when I joined the church, it was still 3-hour church.
Right.
And so I had never gone to 3-hour church, but it was 2-hour church. So I think about it was easier for me having habitually gone for 2 hours to go for 3, rather than if I had never gone to church anywhere before. I also knew a lot of principles, like principle of tithing, for example. There's so many similarities between our beliefs and what other faiths believe. So I really do think that helped prepare me, because there were enough hard things that I needed to accept about my lifestyle, and some other things that were different.
Sure.
That I really think being a member of other faiths from the time I was little was very helpful, because everything wasn't new.
Right.
But I had gone to church. I was raised Methodist, and had gone to church. And then kind of when I was in about junior high, I asked my parents if I could attend the Baptist church in town, because that's where most of my friends from school went. They had a really large youth group, and they did really fun activities. And my parents were very supportive of that. They continued to attend the Methodist church, but they were supportive of me going to the Baptist church. So I did that all through high school. And then when I went to college, I really kind of took a break, because I had some questions that I wasn't getting answered. So plus it was just hard, like living somewhere else and being on your own. And I just wasn't going to church, but still was living a very like Christian lifestyle. And then when I started seeing Adam, I always tell people, like, thank goodness I was attracted to him physically, because he like said all kinds of weird things. Like when he would ask me questions like, where do you think we were before we were here? And I was like, I would seriously think, like, you're kind of weird, but I really liked him. But I'd never thought about things like that. And so he really encouraged me to like go to church, and that it didn't have to be the church that he attended, but that like to just start going back to church. So I had tried to go to I went to a bunch of different churches. I really love architecture and art. And so I took that opportunity to go to some churches that had beautiful architecture and art. And so, but then he invited me, like I would attend with him and his family when at times. And then I started, because I liked him, I started they were called the discussions back then with the missionaries. Yep. And it took me a year before I decided to be baptized. And there were a couple of things for me that is why it took so long. One is I'm not good at faking anything. Sure. I'm not very good at hiding my emotions. I'm not very good about pretending. And so I knew faith was very important to him. And I knew that attending the same church as, like, if we were to get married, if we were to have kids, like that was important to him. Mm-hmm. But I knew I couldn't do that if I didn't believe in it. Like I knew I didn't have it in me, no matter how much I liked someone, to do that and go. And I knew he wouldn't want me to not go. Right. So I really had to study for myself a lot, because I wanted to know for myself. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the reason it took me a longer time.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I don't. I know this might sound weird to other people, but when I hear someone that joins the church after a few weeks, I'm like, oh, whoa, hold on, like take a step back. That's just always my reaction. So to me, taking a year is like, yeah, that's good, because it means that you really, really dove into it and really thought about it.
Yeah, and it was hard to kind of parse out, like, what are my feelings that are really about what I'm learning, and what are my feelings because I really like this person, and I would like for us to have a future, but this is a really big thing in it. And so, it was good for me to know what I was doing. And also, I'm the only member of my family, and it was a big deal. Yeah. And so I wanted to make sure that I just wanted to have confidence in my decision making. So I actually got baptized on December 28th of 2002. So it's also been 22 years since I've been a member of the church. And then we got married that following May. Wow. So, but it was really neat how it worked out. I'll tell you, one of the things that was the hardest, one of the biggest stumbling blocks for me is, and this, I don't even know if I should say this on the podcast, but it's I can't fake anything. I am true to who I am.
But just go for it.
I really didn't want to get married in the temple. Right. And I did not grow up with the temple. Mm-hmm. I did not, so when I grew up, as many girls do, dreaming about what your wedding is going to be like, it included my family and my friends in it. And so, and in a garden, like I had a whole vision. Right. And it took me like a really long time, because I thought I had to make the choice to only get married in the temple, because someone had told me that if you didn't get married in the temple, then you had to wait a year after your wedding before you could be sealed. And I believed in that. And the temple, and we can talk about this if you want to, the temple is why I joined the church. The temple is why.
That's interesting.
It's why I joined the church.
I think it's interesting. Let's go back to it, but not right now. Let's finish up your story.
And so I had to make that decision. I thought that I had to give away the dream of having the wedding I'd always pictured it as, and having my parents there. I mean, I'm an only, having my parents. And then that's what I thought I had to do. So it took me a while to kind of process that. And then when we met with our bishop, our first bishop is one of the greatest men I knew. He was actually in our ward for a little bit. John Wers was our first. He married us actually. Wow, in a different stake in a different ward. But But I remember when we met with him and he actually looked at the rules or whatever handbook, I don't know what it's called. And it's a year from your baptism date.
Yes. Yes.
And so I got baptized in December of 2002. We got married in May of, I keep touching the thing. I'm sorry. We got married in May of 2003 in my garden wedding with my friends and family there. Awesome. And then the coolest thing is, well, there's so many cool things. And then we got sealed in the Houston Temple on January 10th, a little bit after December 28th, but January 10th of 2004, which was a year after my baptism, not after our wedding. And fast forward to 2016, Ava's birthday is January 10th.
Oh, wow.
So she was actually born on the day that we got sealed. So that was a big answer to prayer for me, is that, or it felt like God really saw me because he knew how important that was. And he knew how important that was to my mom and to my dad. And like, it all worked out.
That is awesome. That is fantastic. Yeah, you started saying that. I'm like, wait, that's not the way it works. And then, but no, I'm really glad that worked out really well. So, but you joined the church because of the temple. What specifically about the temple was it that got you to say, yep, this is it?
So the question, I mentioned I had questions. That's why I kind of stopped going to church, is like, I really liked some of the things that I was hearing and they really resonated with me. Like, I believed in that. And then there were some things like I didn't understand. And one of the things, I have a memory as a 16-year-old at church camp. Like, it's so funny. I can remember what the building looked like. I can remember like everything about this moment. We had gone and everybody was sharing their testimonies and their feelings. And this is not a LDS church camp at all. And I raised my hand and I said, well, what happens to people who don't like get to ask for forgiveness and say this prayer where they accept Jesus Christ as their savior? Because I was sitting there envisioning, like, if I had been born in China, I would be Buddhist.
Right.
Like, I mean, I would be.
Right.
And I thought, like, why I'm living in this town where I have all these opportunities to go to church and I hear these things, but I'm just as awesome as the people who live in China. Like, I can remember sitting there thinking that, like, well, like, so they go to hell? Like, I mean, I honestly like thought like that didn't resonate with the characteristics of who I had learned God was.
Yes. Right.
And so there was a really big disconnect for me about that. I always grew up believing and being taught that God was loving and God cared about me and that he cared about everyone. I mean, we don't sing this song in our church, but the Jesus Loves the Little Children song was like part of like all the children of the world. I mean, that's part of my growing up.
So a random tidbit of information, and this was a companion on my mission that pointed this one out, is that there is in our hymn book, there's a hymn called In Our Lovely Deseret. It's the same music as Jesus Loves the Little Children. So every time we would sing it on my mission, we would get to the chorus and he would start singing Jesus Loves the Little Children every time. Anyway, it's a
great song.
It is a great song. It's a wonderful song.
So that's the God that I grew up being taught about, but it didn't resonate with like who the afterlife story. And so I had always had that question. The answer I got back didn't solve that question for me at the church camp as a 16-year-old. I didn't agree with the answer. And so I had always had that question, like God loves all of us, not just me who lives in the South. And so when I heard about the temples, and I've loved how people have been really vulnerable on your podcast and they shared like the things that they may struggle with their testimony, or like, I do not have a perfect testimony of everything about the church. I don't have the same like solidity in my testimony about Joseph Smith the way some people do, or about the Book of Mormon as some people do, or about early church history as some people do. but I have a 100% unwavering testimony about the temple, because the temple answers my question about how does everybody be able, no matter where they're born or what time period they're born in or what their religious or cultural upbringing is, everybody has the exact same ability to receive the same blessings. And I also never believed in, because, and especially now as I'm a mom, I feel this even more. Mm-hmm. I didn't believe in hell the way that I had learned, because if this God who loved everyone, I couldn't imagine that that's where he would send people.
Right.
Like
it
doesn't relate to his characteristics.
Why would he create people to send them there? Right. That doesn't make sense. Right.
And so hearing about the plan of salvation with the temple as this, like, not Christ as the center, but the temple, what the temple allows as part of the plan of salvation, just like answered those questions I've had since I was 16 years old. And so whereas I don't have a perfect testimony of every single facet of the gospel, because I believe in the temple so deeply, you can't have the temple without the restoration of the church. You can't have you can't keep that piece, but have all the, like, have the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants and the prophet, and you can't have that go away and keep the temple.
Right.
So actually, the more trivia about me is all three of our kids' first names tied to the temple.
Oh, wow.
So we have an Elijah.
Okay, right.
Who goes by Eli, but his full name is Elijah. Mm-hmm. We have an Ava, who is the Latin form of Eve. Mm-hmm. We didn't name her Eve because her dad's name is Adam. Oh. And we thought it might be cute if it was a husband and wife, but not as cute if it's a dad-daughter.
Understood.
And then Samuel. So Hannah gave Samuel to the temple.
Yep.
So we purposefully named all three of our children in reference to the temple.
Wow, that is awesome. I love the temple, and so it's awesome that I run across people that are like, "Oh, the temple is amazing," because it's sometimes we forget and we don't go to the temple or we don't do whatever, but the temple is like the pinnacle of it is an embassy here on earth from heaven's embassy on earth. Anyway, so that is awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's not always the thing that converts a lot of people. For some people, it's the harder thing to understand. I mean, there's parts of it that do sound different from a lot of things, but for me, it was the easiest thing to understand because it answered my question in a way that made sense to me.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Well, I don't want to talk about myself, but I have things I'd like to. No, I've run across a couple people because I try to get online and talk to people who are not members of the church. I watch a lot of Protestant sermons and I interact with people and just ask questions. And one of the questions that keeps coming up that is why don't you have a temple? Jesus worshipped in a temple, so why is there no effort to recreate this experience? And the answer is I think it's just people just haven't thought about it because it's always like, well, I don't know. Like, so
I had never thought about it before.
Right. So it's right. But anyway, it's interesting. The temple is fantastic. So anyway.
Yeah.
I learn something new every time I'm there. Different symbols, and each symbol has multiple meanings, and each meaning has multiple symbols, and it's fantastic. So, anyway, I'll stop.
No, please.
I'll stop. So I try to keep these kind of shorter, and you've been fantastic, and you have so much to say, and I feel like I shouldn't end this yet, but we are kind of, I think, past the time that I normally end these. So
I'm good to end it.
Okay. It has been fantastic having you on the Brazos River Saints podcast. And for everyone out there watching, we'd like to have you on next. There will be a link in the description of this video that you can click on it and it'll take you to a calendar and you can select the time that works best for you a time, a place, and time and a location, and I will be there. So hopefully we'll see you next time. All right, thanks. Bye.